Hey there, everybody. This is Lee. So before I show you the rest of this video, I wanted to give some context and some background behind it because there's been a lot of major events that have happened recently. Um, so what had happened was on April 1st, I was notified by YouTube that one of my videos was going to be deleted and there was a content strike on my account. And that video was for a video I recorded of a homeless man huffing aerosol from an aerosol can. The content strike was for promoting harmful content. On April 2nd, the following day, I got another content strike for 3 videos. That was meth addict stomping up Market Street, schizophrenic homeless man shouting and slapping himself at the bus stop, and homeless addict with Tourette syndrome. I recorded a video addressing the strikes and also going into my own personal background and talking about what has been going on recently with my life and just the channel status in general. And so I tried to upload this video and then found because of those 2 strikes that I could no longer upload a video. Now, how YouTube works with the community guideline strikes is you get 3 strikes and you're out. You know, your channel is gone. You're banned from YouTube and your accounts are deleted. So the first strike is sort of a warning. The second strike, the first strike, they take away live streaming, but they consider that a warning. The second strike, they take away your ability to upload for 2 weeks, and then third strike, that's it. I didn't know that I no longer had the ability to upload, so I recorded this 2-hour video going real deep, and I couldn't upload it. So I was feeling kind of distraught, you know, because I kind of put myself out there, and I wanted to get this message out to you guys. And, you know, the thought of losing 15,000 subscribers in 3 days and not being able to say anything about it was pretty upsetting. So I wrote this message and basically in the message talked about how unfair it felt that these videos that were years old were getting flagged consecutively one day after another, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I mean, obviously I appealed them, but I was getting no response at that time. And then I also went and talked about, you know, what I made my video about. Basically, that I also was homeless, that I have personal experience with mental illness and addiction. I mean, not personal direct experience, but my mother is schizophrenic, and almost everybody that I grew up with is an addict. So I wrote this heartfelt message and then got sort of a canned response. And then the next day, that was on the 3rd that I got the response. On April 4th, YouTube shooting happened. And that's major, that's huge. That's going to have major repercussions, you know, obviously for YouTube, but also for the creators. And I just wanted to address what happened, you know, because that the person who shot was also a YouTuber who had concerns about YouTube. I mean, I don't even want to say that. I mean, obviously she was mentally ill, right? Somebody who does something like that is mentally ill. But the scary thing is that I had communication with YouTube about similar issues that I was experiencing, and then she goes off and does that. So that's why I need to put all this in context. Obviously, I'm strongly against that. I would never do anything like that. I myself have also been in a similar situation. when I was maybe 13 or 14, there's a gunman who went into the children's shelter that I was in. I was in a children's shelter called the Receiving Home. It's over in San Mateo. And he just basically barged in there. There was no security or anything there at the time. He barged in there while we were eating. I was over inside our dining area and saw one of the staff just sort of fly through the hallway and then land and skid on the floor. And then the guy goes in there, you know, holding his gun, and tells us all to get the F on the floor. And yeah, I mean, we all made it out. We all made it out relatively unscathed. And he kind of beat up the guy who flew. That guy's name is Mike Bryant. He kind of beat him up a little bit. Mike Bryant was begging for his life, and I mean, I don't want to go too deep into it, but basically I've had a similar experience. So, I mean, I've also wrote to, I had further communication with partner support and sort of lent my support to them, because I know what it's like to go through such a thing. So I just wanted to get that out of the way and sort of give context, because I talk about some of YouTube's changes. I mean, they've obviously made changes on what you can and cannot make in your videos. They've made changes as far as one of the channels that I like to watch is Tau Fledermaus, and he has shotgun videos, and they've made changes that have affected him, sort of like can't show videos of guns being loaded and various other stuff. And I mean, given the recent events, it seems like that's sort of justified. I mean, somebody came and shot up their building. So I just wanted to let that be known. I wanted to be sensitive to the fact that I'm aware of what's going on. Yeah, and I mean, it's a heavy subject. So moving on, I also got I got some resolution, as in my appeals have been processed, and I'll talk about what happened at the end of the video, and I'll talk about what that means for this channel and what changes are going to be occurring because of that. All right, so thank you, and thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments if you have any comments or questions. All right, thanks. Hi there, my name is Lee. This is my channel here. I don't really put myself on display here on this channel too much. My channel's mainly focused on the problems here in San Francisco with homelessness and drug addiction, mental illness. But you know, I have to speak out now because there's a lot that I actually needed to talk about. One of which, the most pertinent, is that I've gotten some content strikes on me. I've already got 2 content strikes. I got a strike yesterday, and I just got a strike today. So yeah, there's a series of things that have been going on. First, I'm going to talk about the changes here on YouTube, and then I'm going to talk about my own personal life and address why I haven't been updating recently, and my plans for the future. So first of all, YouTube changes. There's been a lot of them, and they're kind of pulling the rug out of a lot of people here. I mean, from under a lot of people here. So I've had my problems with YouTube for a long time. Sort of irritating issues such as them constantly demonetizing my videos due to content ID recognition strikes from audio that I've gotten from the Creative Commons or other sort of share alike attributable works, or just open non-copyright classical pieces. I've had repeated strikes against me for works like that, and there's nothing I could really do about it. But that's sort of minor compared to what's going on now, the fact that my whole channel is in jeopardy, and this may be gone tomorrow. So first it was, that was my main concern. Then, I noticed a little while ago while checking up on my site that all of my videos were demonetized and deemed not advertiser friendly. And so I went through the list and tried to challenge those ones that I felt were unfairly targeted for that. And basically they have a policy where they won't look at it if it's below a certain threshold of views. So because I haven't really worked on my channel much, the activity has kind of dwindled some. So very, very few of my videos could actually be reviewed, and those ones that were reviewed were reversed. But yeah, as it stands right now, the vast majority of my videos are deemed not advertiser friendly and are not monetized. And some of them are deemed adult only, and you can only watch it if you have an account and you're signed in and you're above 18. Let's see, then I noticed I was reading the blogs and stuff, YouTube blogs, and noticed that the content policy updates were specifically targeting actions for major YouTubers like PewDiePie or however it's pronounced, and Logan Paul. And then they started sort of reacting to outside events, like events such as the Florida shooting, and their reaction is basically banning any video that shows loading of guns or rifles or anything like that. And it's sort of a knee-jerk response, and a lot of YouTubers like Tauf Ledermaus and another YouTuber, I should have wrote it down, Jorgen, I think is his name, who makes slingshot videos, was actually affected too. And they sort of resorted to now using AI to flag anything that they deemed harmful or not within their content guidelines, which are constantly changing. And so that progressed to where I'm at right now, where I got a content strike for a video that I put up years ago, and maybe it was like 2 years ago, and that one was the homeless man inhaling aerosol. And they said that I was promoting dangerous activities, right? But in reality, the goal that I'm trying to do with my channel is to address the unaddressed issues here in San Francisco. The homeless problem, the people with mental illness on the streets, the drug addiction, it's being addressed superficially here, or at least it was recently, by Ed Lee, but it really wasn't tackling the major problems, and it's really made things worse. But the whole reason why I made this channel is because I was seeing some crazy stuff going on that really shouldn't be existing in a first world country. In the first world country, and especially not in one of the premier cities within that, that superpower, one of the very few superpowers left. And this is the Bay Area, this is the home of Google themselves, right? Twitter is located here in San Francisco. A lot of the things that I film are right around the Twitter headquarters. Dolby, a lot of major companies are located here in San Francisco. And San Francisco also is a huge tourist destination. And the first thing people see when they come here to San Francisco is people out there homeless on the streets, you know, smelling like stale urine and alcohol, you know. You go, the Tenderloin is a really bad neighborhood. You know, it's not exactly dangerous because those addicts, for the most part, will leave you alone. But it's a really unsavory neighborhood that's right there in downtown. And you can see people smoking crack. You can see people injecting heroin. I used to live in the Tenderloin, and I nearly bumped into somebody who was sitting there sucking his thumb while somebody else was injecting him in the neck with a syringe. And you know, I look around and I see that nobody is even acknowledging that these things are occurring, right? People, like, they just look away, you know. People ask for change, like, you know, they say no, maybe they'll give $1 or something, or they'll just walk past. But nobody ever looks and says, what is going on here? This is not acceptable in a modern society. My daughter is having lots of problems. All right, I'm going to pause right now and try to figure out what's going on with the family. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. My daughter was throwing a bit of a tantrum. So anyways, when I left off, yeah, I was talking about why I created my channel in the first place, right? Why I created the channel is because we have unaddressed issues here in San Francisco, and I wanted to make it known. I wanted to make it addressed. I wanted it to be a subject that people were talking about. So anyhow, and you know, there's a lot of other stuff that I'm going to get into later, like my own personal story. But you know, I myself used to be homeless, and not that many people know that. That's something I will go into later. But so in that video, the homeless man that was huffing aerosol, and Google's accusation that I was promoting dangerous activity, I was actually working at the time as a caregiver, or actually I was going to go meet him at the YMCA, and I saw this guy huffing aerosol at the outside the ferry building while I was making my way over to the YMCA that's over near there. And this is not something that I went to go seek out. I mean, none of these videos are things, I never went to go hunt for videos. These are all things I was trying to go downtown to do something or another, generally work. So in the description of that video, I actually go to great lengths to talk about the dangers of aerosols and other inhalants, and just how harmful it is. To the point where you can die. People die all the time. I mean, sure, your brain suffers tremendous damage every time you're inhaling something like that. But, I mean, people die all the time. People will huff on stuff, they will pass out, they will collapse. They collapse in such a way where the substances have replaced the oxygen in their lungs and it cannot escape, and they die. They're already unconscious, they can't move. And you know, it does terrible things to your organs and brain. But anyhow, so I went to contest this strike on my mobile phone, and just as I started to write, it sent the complaint with just half a sentence. So that's a strike that, and once that strike has already been verified, that's done. So I couldn't even talk about how I specifically was talking about exactly how dangerous that was. I got another copyright strike today for a video where I show somebody who I believed was on meth, who was just stomping and kicking the walls and balancing on one leg and doing other strange activities as he's going up Market Street. And in that video, There's no substances, there's no depictions of drugs, there's no cursing, there's no swearing, there's no nudity, there's nothing offensive in that video. Yet it was still flagged. Probably just because in the title I said meth addict stomping up Market Street, right? So I have not contested that yet. I will contest that. But yeah, that's 2 strikes, right? That's 2 strikes. I get 1 more strike and I'm done. Donezo. There's no more Lee's channel. At least not in its current iteration. And you know, I've been working on this channel for years. I've been putting a lot of work in it. I don't think people really understand how much work goes into what I do. I try to make the things that I edit as seamless as possible, but there's actually a lot of time and effort that goes into every video that I make. Now I would regularly spend 18 hours just editing a video. And then it would take forever to render on my old ass computer. Anyways, to not go further off in the tangent that I was going, there are various YouTubers that are getting together to try to start a YouTube union and to address these issues that they're dealing with YouTube, with automatic content strikes, strikes for old videos that have been uploaded, like even in my case years ago, and AI determining what is or is not appropriate without having a human's insight, right? A lot of people are getting flagged by YouTube, and a lot of the YouTubers who have been unhappy with a lot of YouTube's actions for a long time is finally sort of trying to mobilize. If you just search on YouTube for YouTube Union, I'm sure you'll find it. It's by Jorgen. I don't know exactly his name, but it should be pretty apparent, and it'll have a little red box with 3 little play icons inside. So I've joined that union. I don't know exactly what's going to come of it, but in the meantime, let's say tomorrow or whenever after you see this video I get another strike and my channel's gone. There are several ways to I still want to keep doing what I'm doing, right? There's still going to be several other ways to be able to see what I'm doing in the future, right? So I have a website that I started building a few years ago, and I never really finished building it, but you can still go to it. It's leeschannel.org. It's www.leeschannel.org. And in there, if I switch to another I switch to another video hoster or whatever, I'll just update all the videos that are there, all the embedded videos, and there really shouldn't be any impact from switching to YouTube to like Daily Motion or whatever other content hosters there are. I have a Twitter channel. I mean, not channel. I have a Twitter account, and there I'm Lee's_channel at Twitter. And so you can go there and be notified. I'll say something if I get banned from YouTube and have to go somewhere else or have to launch a new channel or whatever. And there's other personal things that I've been working on too, because I kind of saw where things were heading a little bit ago. I have another channel that's completely not devoted to what this channel is about. It's just a gaming channel, just because I recognize that that's what YouTube really wants. I have a Twitch also, and those things are, I'll link it in the description, and you can also go to my About page, and I think it'll have little links for you over there. And so now, part 2 of this video, right? What have I been up to? How come I haven't done anything in so long? So first, the biggest one is my daughter was born. My daughter was born in March 2015. At the time, I was working as a caregiver, or as I stopped 3 months before she was born, but I was working as a caregiver, and I decided to, well, I was suffering from health issues, and I'll get into that later, but I decided to stop working and focus on raising my own daughter. I was working as a caregiver, and it didn't make sense for me to continue working as a caregiver and then paying someone else to raise my child, especially since preschool over here is ludicrously expensive. I looked up just a few numbers, and like, it was something, I think the average cost is like $2,400 a month. And I mean, even if you were to get financial assistance, it's going to be like $1,800 a month. So I would actually be losing money taking care of elderly people while paying somebody else to raise my daughter. And that's not something I'm comfortable with. And that's frankly not something I could even afford. So that's the main reason why I stopped making videos, because I've been at home and I can't exactly be going downtown and, you know, filming the things that I see there, right? I mean, that's not exactly a healthy thing to put your child through. So next, let me talk about the health issues that I was going through. So for a few years now, for several years, I've been having a lot of intestinal issues and pancreatic issues, right? And I was really concerned with what it was. I was having a lot of swelling and pain in my upper left abdomen, and I mean, I was having lots of issues, right? So I went over and saw a doctor, and he couldn't determine what it was. I mean, I had a lot of health scares also. I went to see an optometrist, and the optometrist noticed some marks inside my eye, and said that those were bear tracks, and told me that I could have a rare condition where I had polyps all throughout my colon, and if that were true, that I had a 100% chance of colon cancer. This is independent. She did not know that I had already been suffering intestinal issues. And so that really concerned me, especially since my grandfather died of colon cancer, and his father died of colon cancer, and you know, even in some living family, like, I've heard of polyps being discovered. So that was really concerning. I mean, also she told me other stuff too, like, oh, did you know you have congenital cataracts? I was like, no, I've never heard that before. So I have cataracts, and it never really was an issue before. It's just I was struggling when she was checking my vision. So I don't believe it's congenital, or if it was minor, but it's gotten worse. So I went to go see a doctor, and long story short, they never were able to find out what it was. I did blood tests and everything. I kind of discovered on my own sort of what I was suffering from. The first thing, the reason why I was having such pain in the gut, I mean, I was also having like mucus in my stool and other stuff like that. I mean, I was even having like complete blockages. It was incredibly painful. I'm lactose intolerant, but I mean, that's not big news. It wouldn't be big news for most people, except for I wasn't able to figure out what was going on, and I was drinking ridiculous amounts of milk, eating yogurt, just dairy, everything, cheese, just everything. I mean, I would drink to up to a gallon of milk a day. Keep in mind, I'm 6'8". I'm not a small person. I'm a big person. And that was irritating my gut enough to where it was actually getting inflamed to the point where it just completely constricted. So that, and then also I found out later that on my mom's side of the family, there's a lot of people with diabetes, and you know, drinking all that milk is not good for you. That's a lot of sugar. There's like 13 grams of sugar in every 8 fluid ounces in a gallon of milk. I don't know exactly how many cups there are, but there's quite a few cups. I mean, I've eaten big old bowls of cereal and other stuff. So I don't know. I suspect that I may be pre-diabetic or something like that, because I've also been having issues related to that. But this is kind of going off in an area that's not really pertinent. So anyhow, after my daughter, whoops, that's a little noisy. After my daughter was born, immediately after, or actually, so but let me go back a little bit before my daughter was born, right? I'm suffering these issues, these intestinal issues, and I don't know exactly what it is. I saw the doctor. He poked my pancreas, and it was incredibly uncomfortable, right? So there was something going on with my pancreas there. I didn't know exactly what was going on. My father and his wife and family were really excited to see me and Laura, and they're actually were being very pushy, like making their own plans, like, hey, we're coming over and we're gonna have brunch with you at this time, and you know, just sort of just thinking about what they wanted to do and making plans without talking to us or whatever. And they were being really pushy about what they wanted. They wanted to come over and have brunch with Christina when she was already due. They're like, oh, well, you know, either we'll have lunch and that'll be fun, or, you know, we'll be there for the birth, or, you know, we'll be in the hospital, we'll see the baby. Oh, I'm so excited and stuff. And they weren't really listening to our needs or our feelings. And I just felt more and more that they're being more and more selfish and not really thinking about us and what we were going through at that time with our first child, and as of right now, only child. So I kind of stopped talking to them a little bit, kind of put them on cool down mode, because I didn't really like their behavior. I'd also been talking about some of the health issues that I was going through, and they were not really receptive to what I was saying and thought that I was just making stuff up. My daughter was born on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. So I called my father. You know, they wanted to be there, but I didn't really feel comfortable with it. So I just decided to call and tell him what happened and stuff. And just as I was talking to them, I was talking about, I was talking to my dad, and his wife Connie was over on the side next to him, and you know, via the phone, right? And I told him, you know, like, this was my greatest ambition, right? My greatest ambition was to be a father. I wanted to be the best father that I could possibly be, right? And I didn't say this part that I'm going to say next, but I wanted to be the father that I never really had, right? I had a pretty shitty upbringing. And I wanted to be, since I was 8, it was my dream to become a father, to be a great father. And so anyhow, I told my dad, oh, you know, it was my greatest ambition to be a father. And he laughed at me, right? He laughed at me. He laughed with Connie. I hear them joking with each other, making fun of me on the line. And that really upset me, right? That really upset me. And So afterwards, I stopped talking to them, right? That's the last time I had talked to them on the phone. And so 3 months pass by, they keep pestering, they want to see the child, right? And then they kind of went silent for a little bit. And then Christina gets an email from, Christina, my wife, gets a Facebook message from Connie, right? Talking about how she's up. It's 4 in the morning. What's going on? Lee's been making up these stories. Why can't we see our grandchild, this and that? Keep in mind, Connie's not my actual mother. Connie's my stepmother. But she like, yeah, the girls, her daughters, right? They want to see their niece, and I think they deserve that, and blah, 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 blah. And the message that she sent really upset Christina, right? The way in which that it was worded really upset Christina, and I told her, like, never mind, just block that, just block her. And she went ahead and blocked her, and then Connie got one of her children, or not children, I mean, she's fully grown now, but got one of her daughters to contact with basically the same message, but written by her, and saying, oh, you blocked my mother, then go ahead and block me. So she got blocked too. But anyhow, after my daughter was born, right, I had flashbacks. I had flashbacks of my youth, of my childhood. And they were not good, right? I mean, I never forgot my childhood, but I just got crystal clear visions, memories. I don't want to say visions because it was real, right? Just everything became crystallized. I understood everything, right? I always felt previously, I mean, first of all, as a kid, I always felt like I was unwanted, right? I felt like I was treated unfairly. I felt like I was a scapegoat, you know? I was always blamed for why things were going bad. And as I grew older, I personally went and tried to go back and get contact with my family and stuff, and talk to them, and try to mend things, and I sort of tried to convince myself that, oh, I was young, I didn't know what I was thinking. I didn't know I didn't know what I was thinking, but that, you know, I wasn't seeing things how they really were, you know. I just thought that I was just being immature or whatever. But as I went and had these flashbacks, and also as I went and looked at some old footage that I had, it really became apparent that everything that I was feeling was legitimate. And not only that, it was more than I even had thought at the time. You know, I have footage, I have very little footage, but I have footage of me when I was little, you know, and every time the camera panned to me, the camera turned off. Yeah, I have footage of when I was like 3, 4, let's say 4, and I have footage of my dad not in the room, off with his girlfriend at the time, and him coming home and me being alone in the bed, in my bed on the floor, wearing just a diaper, asking like, where's his girlfriend, you know? I was left alone. I was left alone at 4 years old. I'm wearing a diaper at 4 years old, left alone, as he went off and had his fun with his girlfriend. I mean, I see in the footage, I see them you know, just outright making fun of me. I always just thought like, oh, you know, they're just poking fun or whatever, but looking at the footage, I see that I was the brunt of their jokes, you know. My own memories, you know, looking back on my own memories, I see that they're just self-centered, right? They didn't really take good care of me. But let me go further into my childhood, right? So my father and my mother divorced. They started the divorce when I was 3. That was finalized when I was 4, right? My actual mother, Kathleen. She was schizophrenic, and you know, my dad's abusive, right? Anyhow, they split up when I was 3, and I went with my mother initially, and then it was deemed that she was unfit to take care of me. I mean, there's all kinds of reports of things that were going on. You know, there's accusations that she was force-feeding me pills when I was a baby. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that was going on. I mean, even before they divorced, there's... And just to give you an image of my father's mentality, right? He married a schizophrenic woman, right? He knew full well that she was schizophrenic. And they had a child. They had me, right? He would avoid coming home and dealing with having a child with a schizophrenic woman. He has his own business. It's a comic book shop, Lee's Comics. And he would just sleep there. He would spend the night over there. He just wouldn't come home. He just avoided his problems, right? Unfortunately, one of his problems was a living being. That was me. So I was alone with my schizophrenic mother, and apparently she was force-feeding me pills and doing who knows what else, right? They divorced. I went over with my mother. It was reported that I was in a neighborhood that I didn't belong, and I nearly got hit by a car while she was off distracted doing something else. I go back into my father's custody, or I think it was my grandfather's, and then my father's, and then I see my mom maybe one time, and then I never really see her again. And I never really learn about my mother. So I was living with my father starting around 4. He started hitting me, right? He started with spanks, and then it would go further into beatings, you know, and whippings. I mean, yeah, I remember, even at 4, I remember him, like, you know, spanking me until his hands were all red. He's just sitting there staring at his hand, you know, like, wow, look at how red it is, you know, talking with his girlfriend at the time. But yeah, so he started hitting me. And then, you know, later on remarried, married with Connie. You know, my father is sort of a narcissist, right? He does what makes him happy. He doesn't deal with the things that he doesn't want to deal with, right? And so it sort of became Connie's responsibility to raise me, right? Connie is also very self-centered, right? She has basically a lifelong addiction to marijuana, right? People think that's stupid, right? They think that marijuana is not addictive. There's a difference between physically addictive and emotionally addictive, right? Or whatever. But regardless of how you feel, right? She's addicted. She couldn't stop. And it was affecting her mood, right? But anyhow, that's on a different subject. That's a different tangent. She's in charge of taking care of me. She never liked me. She told me to my face. She told me to my face that she was not thrilled about my dad already having a child. which is kind of ridiculous, right? If you're going to marry somebody who already has a child, right, you're committing to being a part of the family. That child is your child. In my view, if you marry somebody with a child and they have custody and they are raising that child alone, that is now your child, right? You are the parent that you represent in the marriage, right? If you are somebody's husband, then you are that child's father, right? Depending on the age. But they got married when I was like 8, right? But yeah, I mean, the beatings got worse. I mean, I remember all kinds of stuff that was just ridiculous, right? My dad told me to make a sandwich for lunch at school, right? He said, oh, you could make a deli sandwich and put, you know, turkey and this and that. And he was going on and everything that I could put in there. And I was thinking, hey, you know what? I want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'm going to make that for my lunch. And I was making the peanut butter and jelly, and my dad came over and was pissed. He was pissed. He was screaming at me. He said, what did I tell you? You know? And he took off his belt and tried to whip me in the head. He tried to whip me in the face. Boom! And, you know, he's also not small. He's 6'4", but I went and I blocked my face, and I got a huge welt. Huge purple welt. I had to go to school like that. I mean, it was in the morning, right before school. And, I mean, there's other stuff like that. I mean, he's nearly knocked me out before, right? He told me to go up into my room and go fold the laundry. And I'm there, sort of spacing out. And I hear him just coming up the stairs, and he comes in like, what the F are you doing? Like, it's been 20 minutes or whatever. And he just goes, boom, on the top of my head and knocks me to the floor. I'm sitting there, you know, feels like water's gone up my nose, my head's spinning. There's countless examples, right? He's told me he's want to crush me, you know. He's told me that he's gonna make me wish that I was never born. I mean, there's all the kinds of things that I can talk about, right? And at the same time, you know, he and Connie are going through relationship issues, and I'm sort of blamed for the issues, right? They want to send me off to boarding school, right? They want to send me off to military camp or whatever. And this is like, I left there when I was like 10, right? 10 or 11. So this is all previous. This is in between the age of 8 and 10 that all of this happened. But, you know, I started to think about, you know, in present day, I started to think about being a father, right? And how important that is, how it changes your perspective on people. And then I think, what kind of person would have a child and then just kind of abandon it and just leave it there with somebody that they know is not mentally fit to take care of the child, right? What kind of person puts their own I don't even want to say needs, but their own interests above their own newborn child, you know? Yeah, not any person that I want anything to do with. All right? Anybody who feels that way, I want nothing to do with. I mean, and the abuse alone is not, I mean, that's not it, obviously, right? It doesn't exist in a vacuum. I've never received support from my father, you know, and I've never really asked for it, except for once or twice, right? when I was 18, well, anyhow, I was taken out from there. Let me go through the whole story, right? So I would consistently run away from my father and get beaten upon returning home. But one time I ran away and I never came back. And I was picked up by the fire department, who somebody had called and reported that I was a homeless kid. And I was taken into the fire station and then interviewed by somebody from Child Protective Services and taken into a place over in Santa Clara called the Bill Wilson Center. In there, they start asking me questions about my mother, right? And I didn't know anything about my mother, right? All I knew was the things my dad had told me, because I had no contact with her. So I was saying, like, she's like, oh, she takes drugs in a pill form, like she takes crack in a pill form. Great, because this is what my father had been telling me. And they're like, no, that doesn't exist. Crack in the pill form doesn't exist. But they asked enough questions to where, when I was forced to go back with my father, I started asking about my mother. And he had her number in a phone book, and I was able to talk to her. And it was the best conversation of my life. I never had a conversation like that. I mean, it was super enjoyable. And after 15 minutes, my dad told me I was talking too long, and I had to go. But I wanted to go see her. I went to go spend the weekend, and I had so much fun spending the weekend there. I asked if I could stay, and I did stay, and that was that. I never went back. So I was living with my mom, who at the time seemed like she had things under control, but you know, things didn't last too well. I mean, you know, she's schizophrenic, and you know, you're schizophrenic. That's it. There's no curing schizophrenia. So it seemed to be under control at the time, but due to several circumstances, she kind of went off the rails. She was taking an antipsychotic called Zyprexa, right? That antipsychotic causes, you know, a variety of effects, right? You know, weight gain and whatnot, but also it causes, you know, muscle spasms, and so they usually combat it by giving some muscle relaxants, or anticonvulsives or whatever. So she's on that, right? This is like an opiate, and she sort of gets addicted to it, right? And she starts having migraines. They give her some heavy-duty migraine medication. She's feeling pain in her hip. They give her cortisone shots. Then they start giving her painkillers. And it sort of progresses and kind of just gets out of control, like this always does, right? I mean, the Big Pharma is kind of notorious for pushing opiates, right? Because of how addictive it is. But anyways, she would be up for days at a time. She would be asleep for days at a time. She would be up. She would be seeing things that weren't there. She wouldn't see things that were there. She thought I was my dad at one point. And, you know, she was saying bizarre stuff, right? She was saying that she was R2-D2. She would be crashing into things and stumbling around. She would try to clean up and she would just smash more stuff. And I was completely reliant on her. Coming from a really strict household to being in a very lax household, I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't go to school. You know, I would just I would be truant. My mom would call in for me and tell them that I was sick. I'd be up all night watching TV with my mom. She would take me to her psychiatrist, and I would tell him I can't sleep at night, and he prescribed me trazodone, right, which is an anti-anxiety medication and antidepressant that has a side effect of making you drowsy. My daughter's screaming again. Well, anyhow, things had progressed to the point where there's no food in the house, right? There was there was nothing to eat because she hadn't gone out to go buy anything to eat. There was the sink was disgusting. She had been up for 3 days, so I also had been up for 3 days. So I had been 3 days, no food, no water. I felt too disgusted to go to the sink to get water. So no food, no water, no sleep for 3 days, and I got really sick. I was taken over to the hospital, or to see my pediatrician. I told him what was up, and I was taken out of there, and I was put into the system, right? The system was not exactly the best place in the world, and I suffered a lot of abuse over there in the system as well, right? The foster care system that I'm calling, even though I wasn't put directly in foster care. I was given the choice of going into a foster home or going into a group home, and not really told what the differences were, except for that the group home was in San Jose, where I was sort of raised, and the foster home was like in Modesto or something. So I went for the group homes, and the whole time I'm on heavy doses of trazodone, right? Heavy, heavy, heavy. I was taking ridiculous amounts in a giant trapezoidal pill. It was sort of dulling me to everything, and I was gaining a lot of weight. They kept raising the dose until I got to something ridiculous like 500 milligrams or something like that, and they were switching me. I was on Wellbutrin, Effexor, or no, Luvox. They tried to put me on Effexor. I was getting side effects like incontinence, right? I would pee my bed in the middle of the night, and then they were giving me something like to squirt up my nose that would stop my kidneys from functioning at night, so I wouldn't wet the bed. I mean, it was a mess. It was bad. And eventually, I don't know how I happened to have the insight to do so, but eventually I just put my foot down and refused to take any more medication. And the children's shelter that I was in at the time basically told me that I could not get off the medication, and that I would have to switch to something else or taper off or whatever. And I told them, no, that's it, no more. I said, oh, it's really dangerous. If you don't take your medication, we're going to force you to take the medication. And I begged with them. I was like, please, just let me do it. Just give me the chance. Just let me try. And I was able to get my way, right? I was able to get my way, and I got off that stuff, and it was amazing. It was amazing. There was a splash of water in the face, right? Everything became crystal clear. The fog was gone. I mean, I was numb previously to the point where I was held hostage at gunpoint, and I didn't feel anything. I was looking at the guy with the gun, and I was thinking, he looks like an actor. This looks like a stage performance. You know, like, he looks too nervous. This doesn't seem real, right? Meanwhile, all the other children are screaming and crying. And I mean, that's a whole nother story, right? So anyhow, after all of this, I'm put into you know, the system or whatever, and then I'm hit 18 and I'm emancipated, right? That's it. There is no, I didn't get to go to any of my own court proceedings, even though I asked to. I was just thrown out. They packed all my shit up and dropped me off outside of a homeless shelter. And yeah, I was homeless. Here in San Francisco, I was homeless. At the time, I was living in a placement here in San Francisco. But they dropped me off outside of a homeless shelter, and that was that. No vouchers, nothing. No cell phone. That was it. So I was dropped off outside of the homeless shelter, right? The Larkin Street Youth Shelter here in San Francisco, which funnily enough is not on Larkin, it's actually on Ellis. But I went over to my friend's house, my friend Carlos, who basically is like a foster brother, was raised with me in the group homes, went to some of the foster homes that I was with, even though he wasn't a foster kid of theirs, right? He just kind of hung out with me. And so we'd living together in 3 different cities. So he was here going to the Academy of Art college at that time. Now it's a university. And I stayed with him, and I was able to stay with him for like 3 weeks. And then his girlfriend was tired of me living there, and I had to go back to the shelter, right? So I went to the shelter, and that's where I was at. The shelter is not a good place, right? The homeless youth shelter, right? It's for young adults up to the age of 24. I mean, there was drugs that have been stolen from. They had weird sort of parasitic worms inside of the shower. You know, this people just, it's just junkies, right? People with many forms of hepatitis, you know, from shooting, and you know, people were prostituting, people selling drugs inside of that actual shelter. But anyways, while I was there, while I was in there, I got a job, or even previously, right? So I'm homeless. I'm homeless, and I have no security, no safety net, no money, no nothing. I had called my dad, or not called my dad. I went to go see him. I was in the car with him, and I was trying to talk to him, and I was trying to work up to asking if I could stay with them until I got my feet under me. And even though I didn't breach the subject, he saw where I was going, and he definitely avoided it. And yeah, I got no support. So I was kind of left to my own devices, and you know, through work I was able to save up enough to move into a place with Carlos, right? And so Carlos and I were living together. Carlos and I both had an interest in art at the time, in fine art. We'd gone to a pre-college visual arts program at Oregon State University a couple years in a row, and that's what we wanted to do, right? He already kind of did it and struggled with the university or college environment at the time. And I was set. I was ready to go, right? I could finally do what I wanted, right? When I was inside of the system, I got my, I took the proficiency exam when I was 16, right? When I was first able to take it, I took it right away. And everyone was really pissed with me for doing it. My social worker, the foster care agency, everybody was upset with me. But I took it, and they said, you know, if you pass this, you're gone. And of course I passed it. And so that was it. I was done with high school. I was done with high school at 16. But yeah, I was taken out of the foster home I was in, and I was put into what they call a halfway house. Now, it's not a halfway house like you're an addict or anything. It's a halfway house as in like halfway to independence, right? While I was in there, a condition of me being able to stay there was me going to high school, right? And I hated it. I hated the idea of it. Why am I going to high school when I already have a proficiency exam, right? Why can't I go to college? I want to go to college. I want to go to City College. They wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't allow it. They said, you can go to City College, but you're going to have to go to high school at the same time. And while you're going to City College, you're going to have to work for a GED. And I was saying, why would I want a GED? I have a proficiency exam. That is better than a GED. You know, I can go to college right now. But they wouldn't allow it. And because I hadn't been going to high school, because I was done with high school, I was behind on credits, and they made me go into a continuation high school, Ida B. Wells, and it was a lousy school. It was lousy. We didn't even have books. Our math teacher was our gym teacher. He was up there in his Adidas tracksuit. I'm recognizing some of the math problems on the board from an IQ test that I had taken online. There's no higher level of math. We don't have books. We got Xerox copies of segments of books and told that if we liked the books we were reading that we had to go, you know, to a library or somewhere else to go finish the book. Our lunches were pouches of milk and an apple. So I did not enjoy that, and I just didn't go. And because of that, I was kicked out when I was 18. So that's why I was homeless. But anyhow, so now I finally have a place, right? I'm not in a shelter. I have my own place. I can go to college. I could go to the Academy of Art University. I go over and talk to somebody over at that financial aid department or their admissions department, and he tells me oh, you just missed the financial aid enrollment. You can enroll, but it's not going to happen until after the semester starts. It will cost you $2,000 to start now, but you should be reimbursed by your financial aid when that does come in. So I call my father and I ask if I can get a loan for $2,000, right? And that it was only going to be for 3 months until I get my financial aid, and that I was going to pay him back. And he screamed at me. He screamed at me. He told me that that I got to learn how to crawl before I can fly, and basically shot me down, completely tried to shoot me down. Put his wife Connie on the line. She was telling me that the world doesn't deserve, or that the world doesn't owe me anything, and that I don't deserve anything, and telling me, what are your plans? Do you plan to live on welfare like your mom, right? And I mean, I didn't really say much, but that really bothered me, right? My mother's schizophrenic. At that time, my mother's schizophrenic. She had no other option, right? She was a registered RN. I mean, she was an RN. She was still licensed, but she's schizophrenic. She cannot work. And yeah, I mean, asking for a loan from your father for 3 months for not that much money. I mean, he's an independent businessman. He has the money. They have the money, right? That's not an issue. The issue is, the issue is letting me borrow some of that money. But yeah, those were the only 2 times that I ever asked for help, right? And that's the outcome of both times. So anyways, I'm all this stuff I'm thinking about, this and a lot more that I just don't have time to get into. And I realize just what a terrible job my father did, right? And you know, for a long time I was upset with Connie, right? I felt like, oh, things were so great until Connie came around. And to an extent that's true, right? It was better when she wasn't there, and it got worse when she was there. But the blame is not, ultimately my father is to blame, right? Whether that's true or not, my father is to blame, right? Either it never got worse and it was always that bad, in which case my father is all, you know, obviously to blame, or he was with somebody and she made it worse, right? Let's pretend it was all her, right? He still picked her, right? He's not stupid. He knows what was going on, at least on some level, right? I mean, he was the one who was beating me anyhow, right? So how much blame could you put on somebody else? And, you know, I know that he himself was terrorized by his father, right? But, you know, I sympathize with other people. I empathize with other people who have been abused as a child, right? It's a terrible thing. It's not right. But once you go on from being the victim to being the victimizer, my sympathy ends, right? Because what abuser wasn't abused themselves? They were all abused. When you cross over and become the abuser, there's no sympathy left for you, right? You become a predator. You're no longer the prey. You were the victimizer, right? But yeah, I talked about all this stuff. I sent a text to my father talking about all these things, telling him that this was that he needed to take responsibility for everything that he's done, right? He needs to take full responsibility and not make any excuses, and be a man about his actions, essentially. And that's not something he could do. He was not capable of doing it at all. He was coming up with the most ludicrous excuses that you could ever think of, right? I was talking about times where he's pelting me with baseballs, right? Just times where I'm on the verge of being knocked out for being in my room, right? After he sent me there. You know, about getting whipped for making myself a sandwich that he didn't approve of, right? His excuse, was that he said, listen, it would take you ages to tie your shoes. And you would take forever brushing your teeth. Those were that's literally what he said. I wish I had my phone here. If I had my phone, I will show you the text. It literally said that was his excuse. That was his reasoning. He was not taking responsibility. He's not capable of taking responsibility for his actions, right? He's not capable of looking within himself and really analyzing what's going on. He's just living his life and repeating the actions that were done to him. So, yeah, I basically gave him a final test of character, right? I gave him a final chance to be a man. I gave him a final chance to smooth things over. I wanted to forgive him, but you can't forgive somebody who doesn't believe they did anything wrong. You cannot forgive somebody who accepts no responsibility, because what are you forgiving them for? They didn't do anything wrong, right? And so that was it. I had to stop talking to him. And unfortunately, my sisters were sort of caught in the crossfire, right? I mean, I had a relationship with them, right? They were my sisters, but I didn't feel comfortable having not having a relationship with my father or Connie, and having a relationship with them, having them come over, telling them about my life, telling them about my daughter, you know? I mean, ultimately, that's their parents, right? That's their allegiance. I'm their half-brother, right? Sort of ostracized from the family. Ostracized from the family before I withdrew myself from that branch of the family. But so that was a major thing, and coming to the realization that I was unwanted and mistreated, and the extent of the mistreatment, and seeing the footage, seeing the camera shut off as I came into frame, and just hearing, oh, you know, like Connie's holding the camera and I say something, she moves to me, oh, and then the thing stops, right? Just seeing the disgust. It really, really affected me, right? I felt worthless. I felt unloved and unwanted, because that's how I was treated, and I realized for years I was unwanted, right? And you know, I was thinking a lot of, I mean, you have to go through painful moments to move on. You have to suffer, or otherwise you're not going to be building new neurons, you're not going to be learning from the experience, you're not going to be able to accept it. You're going to run away from your issues, they're never going to be dealt with. I mean, starting from 18, I had recurrent dreams that I would challenge my father to a fight in the backyard, in their backyard. And he would say, okay. I would go into the backyard and hold my hands up and be ready to mess him up, and just be so tired and slow and throwing punches in slow motion, and he's not going in slow motion, and just catching another savage beating, and just being trapped under him and being beaten on, right? And I was having that night after night, every night. That's what I was having. I would get angry about stuff, right? Somebody borrowed my cell phone without asking me when I was over inside this house, which no longer exists, called Guerrero House. Between the homeless youth shelter and me living on my own, I lived at this place called Guerrero House, right? Inside there, somebody borrowed my phone without asking me because he misplaced his phone. And I got incredibly pissed, right? I got unreasonably, well, I'm not sure if it's unreasonable, but I got incredibly pissed. And as I'm really pissed, and at the same time I'm having these dreams,
of getting beaten by my father, suddenly I get my father's image in my head as I'm pissed, and then I just go bananas and just pick up this thing of luggage and I smash it on the ground and kick it so hard I split my toenail in half. I forgot where I was going with that, but so after having my child, right, I had to deal with the fact that I have the same issues my father has, right? Or I had the same issues that my father has. I would get incredibly angry, right? Argue with my wife, would argue, and I would just get the incredible urge. I just wanted to slap the F out of her, right? But I never did that. I would always hold back. My child was born. It can be very challenging. It can be very difficult, right? And even when she was a little thing, right, I would get incredibly frustrated, right, and want to yell at her, right, and want to spank her and stuff. I had to deal with my issues. I had to face them head on, and it was incredibly painful. It was incredibly painful. It was incredibly painful to think about being unloved and being abused, being a scapegoat, being ostracized from the family, right? But because I went through that suffering, I became a better person. I no longer have those issues, right? I no longer have those incredible anger issues. I'm much more mature, right? I'm much more reserved and even keeled. Already I was kind of known by others for being real stable, but at a certain point I would hit a breaking point, right? But that doesn't occur anymore, right? I really feel like there was an enlightening experience. But my father, he refuses to actually take a look at himself. He refuses to really analyze himself, right? And obviously he refuses to ever go into counseling or therapy. He doesn't want to do any of that stuff, right? He walls himself off so much that a single glance within himself is dangerous to the point where he feels like it could destroy him. He cannot drink, he cannot do substances. The last time that he smoked weed, he had a breakdown. He told me this, right? It's because he's got a shell, impenetrable when he's sober, but he's got a shell that's protecting his insides, and it would be dire for him if that was ever penetrated. So as I'm trying to talk to him, it cannot be done. Anyways, I had to move on, and so that's one major thing I was dealing with, right? So after that, I stopped talking to him, and it was a great thing. It's one of the best things I've done, right? Probably the best thing I've ever done was to get off of antidepressants. But the second best thing I've ever done was not talk to, or, other than having a child and getting married and all that, is to cease communication with my father, right? I felt so much better. I felt so much better about myself. I felt so much happier. Being able to live my own life. I sort of, even though I was living on my own, I still, anytime they asked me to come over, I'd come over. I'd go over and help them paint. I would go over, they called, I got a call right back, or answer their call, Being able to have complete freedom from them, not feeling those things, not having to go over to like some sort of family gathering where where everybody in the family gets put into some giant book which has every member of the family except for my pages conspicuously absent. I mean, even people who've spent the majority of their life behind bars are inside there, and I'm not. Going to family events, you know, where one of the family members had a major windfall, and you know, everybody in the family gets huge sums of money and I get sort of a token. That kind of stuff. Not having to deal with that anymore. Not having to deal with being at a family event and nobody wants to talk to you. So another thing that I was dealing with recently, I've always wanted to, so I stopped talking, so I left my mother when I was 13. I lived with her from 11 to 13. And I was taken out because of how sick I was getting under her care, or lack thereof. And I had contact with her for a little bit as I was inside the children's shelter. But I lost contact with her when I was 14, and I was only able to regain it when I was 17. My social worker had given her my number. And I talked to her, and she was, she told me she fled to Wisconsin because she was afraid that my father was going to kill her, and that her her friends were flesh eaters, and that they had grabbed her and they carved a swastika in her head, in her forehead, but fortunately it was backwards, so it meant life instead of death, and talking about vampires and flesh eaters and blood drinkers. And I mean, that's what she was talking about. I talked to her 3 times. And, you know, she gave me her number. The last time I talked to her, she told me she was in some sort of facility, and she wanted me to tell them that she was sane and to let her go. And she gave the phone to the doctor, and I told him, like, she's not sane, you got to keep her in there. And then I hung up right away before he could even respond. And I threw away her number. And that was in, I think that was probably in September of 2004, right around my birthday. And right when I turned 18, and I left there, so I didn't have her number, she didn't have my number. And I just thought that that was, at the time I felt like that was the best thing to do, because I couldn't have her number and not want to contact her, but every time I talked to her, it was incredibly painful because there was nothing I could do to help her. There was nothing that could be done to help her, right? And it was really painful for me to interact with her. But after that, I mean, over the years, I've tried to find her info again, right? I've asked my dad on numerous occasions for her contact info, and he would always say, no, you don't want to talk to her. She's just going to try to destroy your life. And I would spend hours doing Google searches trying to see if I could find stuff, doing image searches, finding all the images for her. You know, she has a few different aliases, searching everything, seeing every single picture. You know, on Facebook, searching year after year, just trying to see if I could find a Facebook page for her. I mean, there's so much I wanted to talk to her about. There's so much I was excited to tell her about, you know, as it's going through all my various life milestones, you know, telling her, like, hey, you know, I have a girlfriend, telling her that I was going to get married, that I got married, that she's pregnant, that I'm going to have a child. You know, talking about growing up and being a man, you know, just telling her about all the various things that I was proud of, that I had achieved. And I would always had that built in. I was always eager to be able to tell her these things. And I found out recently, like maybe a year ago, that she's dead. She's dead, and not only that, she's been dead for 12 years. She died in December of 2004. So I talked to her shortly before she died, and I threw away her number shortly before she died. And she died over there in Wisconsin. She's buried in Madison, Wisconsin. And I got her death certificate. I looked at it. I mean, she died from over pharmacology. I think they said over prescription on there. And you know, the drugs that she was on have been taken off of the market because they were too dangerous, obviously. I mean, people were dying. She's one of the people who died. And so there's nothing I could do. I don't have any memento of her. I don't have anything that is hers, right? My friend Carlos, who went through the system with me, he was an orphan, but he had some things of his mother. His mother died when he was 15, and he had some of his mother's possessions to remember her by, right? He had this bath soap and various other little things in a shoebox to remember her by, like her cross and stuff. But I have nothing. I tried to find out if I could do anything, but they throw out the belongings after a certain time period that had already lapsed. So I don't have anything of my mother's. And so that was something that was hard to deal with. I mean, on top of the things that I was already dealing with that, it was really difficult. Let's see. So, other things that I've been doing or trying to deal with. A project that I've worked on and that I really want to complete is a documentary based on the foster care system. Right? I wanted to talk about the foster care system, going through the foster care system, what it's like. I wanted to talk about why people go in the foster care system in the first place, what they go through when they go through the foster care system, and what they come out to, right? So, I mean, I kind of summed up a lot of what I've gone through. I haven't talked too much about being in the system, but I mean, you suffer abuse, you go in the system, you suffer more abuse, they kind of deprive you of freedom. I mean, I was not allowed to leave a lot of those places. A lot of those group homes were corrupt, and a lot of those foster homes are corrupt. A lot of those foster homes, they just sort of use you as an extra income, an extra source of income. I mean, they give you vouchers, they reimburse you for certain things, and certain things that were never spent on me. A lot of those people are abusive, but after that, after you've been in this place that sort of strips you of your freedom, you're then thrown to the wolves outside. They say that 50% of foster youth become homeless. In my personal experience, everybody that I've known in the foster care system has been homeless, 100%, including myself. I mean, not only that, they're all addicts. They're all addicts. I'm the only one who never, that I went through the system with, that I know that never had a problem with addiction. And the reason why is because I've always felt like my intelligence was one of my greatest assets. And that's something I always wanted to preserve, even as a kid. So I never took any drugs. I was sort of a teetotaler, right? I never did any of that stuff. And actually, in my early teens, I completely stopped eating all candy, chocolate, drinking sodas or anything like that. No caffeine. So I completely did all of that stuff, and I think that was a major thing that spared me the fate that my peers went through. I mean, in the shelter, I had a friend named Ashley Farrell, and I mean, she went through a lot. She became a meth addict. Last time I talked to her, she was living in Golden Gate Park. You know, there's another person that I went through the shelter with, Brian. He was younger than me. He was an alcoholic. He became an alcoholic. I saw him in the shelter. It was bad. I mean, there's people I know who just see them out on the streets. Their eyes are wide. They're all on crack. My friend Carlos, my best friend, he's got a severe addiction problem. I mean, he's the main person I filmed. I wanted to film multiple people, but he's the first person that I filmed for this documentary. And I filmed what life was like before he entered the foster care system. That's only 1/3 of the story that I wanted to show for him. And I wanted to show multiple stories, including my own self. He's got severe alcoholism. I mean, addicts are addicts, right? You're addicted to anything. You can be addicted to anything. Any substance, at least. You know, like, he's, you know, smoking weed. He's smoking excessive amounts of weed. It would always start, it's the same cycle every time. Just starts like, you know, I just need to do a bit of moderation. Smokes a little bit of weed, smokes more, smokes massive amounts of weed, starts drinking, thinks that he could just drink a little bit, start drinking more, drinking super excessively, and eventually gets to the point where his heart stops and he's taken into the emergency room, and they give him an injection in the heart to kickstart his heart, right? He basically dies. That's happened multiple times. I've had to call, I don't know if they're giving him injections to start his heart again, or if they're giving Narcan, or what they're giving him, but he collapses, or he passes out, or he blacks out, wakes up still drunk in the hospital with an injection mark in his sternum, right? This has happened multiple times. I've had to call people and tell him that he was a danger to himself, to get him to be forced into the ambulance and taken into the hospital. I really, really want to talk about what's going on, right? This is not just something that's biological, right? This is something that's a direct result of the life he's lived. It's a direct result of the abuse he suffered at home, and just his entire life leads to this point, right? And he's not the only person. I mean, I am essentially the exception in that I've never had a problem with abuse, but you know, I have my own problems, right? Or I had my own problems that I had to face, that I had to deal with. but he's been unwilling to work with me on this. You know, he doesn't even want to talk to me. Every time I've tried to talk to him, he's said he's busy. He'll call me back, and his calls never come. His alcoholism has gotten him into trouble. He's been arrested several times, and right now he is in jail. Right, he's called me. I bailed him out the last time, and he lost his court case, and now he's in jail. And so I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to complete what I worked on with him. If you want to see what I've done, I mean, I did it when I was taking classes over at City College. Go on to my discussion page. I'll put a link inside the description if you want to see that. And you guys can watch. It's raw. It's not really edited too well. But I feel like what I have already is pretty moving. So that's something that's been really difficult to deal with, right? Another thing that has happened recently is I was contacted by my older sister, by my older half-sister. My mom had a few children before, and she had 2 children before I was born and 1 child afterwards. And they were all put up for adoption, basically, except for the oldest one, who was given to his grandparents. My whole childhood, I wished that I had, like, I wished that I had a big sister, right? I didn't have a mom. I didn't have anyone loving or nurturing like that. I used to have dreams and fantasies of having a mother figure, like an older sister who would love me and protect me. And I mean, even when I was 11 and I was there with my mother, and she was telling me about having that daughter who was 18 at the time. Yeah, I used to just think about how nice that would be, you know. So I was contacted by this older sister, right, who was adopted. She was able to somehow or another track down my information, and she contacted me, and we talked, and she was really excited and wanted to learn all about our mother, right, because she never knew my mother. My mother basically fled the hospital after she was born. So I talked to her. I told her about my mother being schizophrenic, and she was talking. She kept asking questions like, "What was she like? What were some of the things that she was interested in? You know, what kind of songs did she listen to? Did she ever used to sing to you? What songs did she sing to you?" And I was telling her, like, look, she was schizophrenic. You know, she wasn't there. We didn't listen to music. We didn't go out. She didn't sing to me. She didn't listen to music, really, you know. We watched TV at home. That's what we did. We went to the movie theater a few times. I mean, but she kept asking these same questions. She kept wanting to hear about what kind of person, you know. She has this fantasy that I think a lot of adopted children have this fantasy that their parent is something better than they really are, right? But the truth is, I mean, it's a hard truth, it's a difficult truth, but the truth is that if you were put up for adoption, it was for a reason, and it's not because your parent was super awesome. I mean, generally speaking, they suffer from mental illness, or they were raped, or they were on drugs, they're homeless. And it's not going to be you're not going to get what you want out of that, you know, and I don't think that she could really accept that. And I was, you know, I get this weird feeling that she's got this fantasy about our mother that's not real, you know, and she was asking me about my mother, and I'm sitting there trying to think of things to say, you know, and I could just think of little small details, right? Little habits that she had that I sort of picked up, which calmed me down a little bit, and then I just got intensely sad, you know, because she's gone, you know, and it's really sad to think about, you know, the habits that I've picked up from my mother to calm me down as a child when I was in distress. You know, me picking that up from my mother, you know. Yeah, it's just a really depressing thing to think about. So I told her, you know, I can't keep talking about this stuff. It's making me very sad. And that's the last I talked to her, you know, and I have really mixed feelings, right? Because a lot of my life, I would have loved nothing else than to have an older sister, right? And now I'm a full-grown man, right? Full-grown, matured adult. And I have an older sister who's got these childhood fantasies. And I feel like it's a weird sort of role reversal where I'm the more mature adult and she's still got these childhood fantasies. And, you know, it's like wanting something your whole life and then getting it too late. It's like if you wanted a Game Boy your whole life. Oh, as a child, the Game Boy is super cool. Oh, I really wanted one, right? Oh, I would love it. I would do this and do that. And then getting one now. And you got this little crappy brick, this little, you know, beige plastic brick with a green screen that makes little beeping noises. And, you know, it's essentially as functional as a Tamagotchi, right? That's what it's like. If you got what you wanted 20 years ago or longer now, chances are you would not like it. But, you know, that's I have mixed feelings, right? I don't know if it's just me, if maybe I'm too seclusive, right? Maybe I need to reach out and try to branch out and have a family, but I've never had a family before, and it's a weird thing for me. It's weird that she wants to be my family when I don't know her, right? I've never known her. We're related by blood, but nothing else. I have really mixed feelings about it, you know, and I sort of question myself sometimes about how I feel and whether I'm right in my feeling. But that's another thing that I've been dealing with. Regarding my father, just moving on to a different subject that I've been dealing with, you know, I've been thinking about, I don't like the fact that I was a victim and that I didn't do anything about it and that I can't do anything about it. I don't like the fact that I don't have any legal recourse now. It happened over 10 years ago, the abuse and neglect, and I can't take him to court. I can't take him to civil court. He never sexually abused me. If he sexually abused me, I would still have that option, right? They have laws in place to where you have, if you were sexually abused as a minor, you have up to 4 years from when you started feeling the psychological effects of that as an adult to take them to court, right? And I would love to be able to get some kind of justice. But that can't happen. Those same laws don't work for physical abuse or neglect or just other, which I think is kind of ridiculous, right? That stuff is damaging. It's really damaging. And I think sexual abuse is really damaging. They're both really damaging, and they both, as a victim, you have a high likelihood of becoming a perpetrator, right? They're both things that are really need to be dealt with, but it's not treated the same way. So there's nothing I could do for that, right? I have fantasies about beating him, but I don't want to get arrested. You know, I want to be there for my child. I want to raise my child, so I can't do that. I had thought about writing a Yelp review and talking about all the things that I went through. And I had planned it all out. I was ready to execute. I made a Yelp account. I sat there and I was ready to write. And then my wife came in and distracted me right when it was going to happen, and I lost my chi at that crucial moment. And I started to think about it, you know. And I started to think about what I would achieve by doing that, right? I mean, my father, he never cared about much. He never cared too much about me. He never cared too much about, you know, his other girls either, right? His primary care is about him and his own happiness. And the only thing, I mean, he doesn't have any close friends, right? He's not really close to any family members. The only thing that he really loves is his business. You know, he's poured his life into his job since 1981. It's his passion. Lee's Comics was his passion. And that's his life's work. All of the friends that he has, all of the acquaintances are from there as a direct result of him working there. They are friends with him because of his position. I mean, he has friends in the industry, right? That he would have never been friends with had he not had that job. That job is that job is him, right? That job is his. Without that, I mean, that job is his identity, right? And for me to attack that, I would be damaging the only thing he really loves in his life's work, and I'm not comfortable with that. I don't like that, right? I mean, that's like what's going on here right now. I'm proud of what I built with my YouTube channel, right? I started with nothing back in 2008, and I struggled to try to find an audience, you know? And I worked really hard to try to build up something that people, I did that to try to build an audience, and I'm proud of what I did, right? And I'd be upset if it's taken away. And that's one more content strike, and that's what's going to happen. So I didn't want to do that very same thing, you know? I guess I'm too compassionate to do something like that. So I guess live and let live. Although it's sort of an unsatisfactory decision, I still... Anyhow, it's something I've been contemplating. But So those are the things that I've been dealing with. Those are the things that have been on my mind. Those are some of the reasons why I haven't really been active. Now, I haven't been active on my channel, but I have been doing other stuff, right? I have my I have my website that I haven't completed, but I'm going to try to complete, especially now that my channel is essentially under attack by the Google AI bots. So I have my website, leeschannel.org. I have my other channel on here, Lee's Gaming Channel, where I'm trying to build an audience playing video games and stuff, and you could go check that out if you want. I've been sort of futilely trying to build a Twitch audience, so I'm not completely reliant on Google. But I've been having ISP problems, so it's hard to stream. I mean, I had great plans for Lee's channel and for what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to do my documentary. I wanted to continue to build. I had ambitious plans for the future. I wanted to make t-shirts and donate them to the homeless youth shelters, right? Because I remember being homeless, and that was awesome. I loved it. I loved being able to get new clothes. I never got new clothes as a child, right? And as a homeless person, you go through clothes pretty fast. I mean, so where it stands right now, if my channel doesn't get deleted, or banned or whatever, my plan for the future, my daughter just turned 3, and I plan, when she's gonna go to kindergarten when she's 4. When she's in there, I will have free time in order to devote myself fully onto this channel and make it better than it's ever been before. And there's a lot of projects I want to work on. You know, I want to do a documentary on the homeless problem here in San Francisco, on all the various factors that go into it. So anyhow, I know this is a huge, long video, but I want to thank you for making it all the way through this video. And I want to thank you for being a subscriber or a viewer or whatever. I'm glad you got to hear everything that I had to say before my channel got deleted. So thank you. Thank you very much. Please, if you want to stick with me as I go through whatever happens here, please go onto my Twitter and follow me there, and I'll let you know where I'm going next if I can't be here anymore. All right, thank you for watching.
Hey everybody, thank you for watching my video. I'm glad that you made it this far. In fact, I'm amazed you made it this far. So my videos were processed, the appeals were processed, and what they decided were, first of all, the first video, the homeless man who was huffing aerosol, they decided that that was not against their community guidelines. That's not going to be deleted. However, they made that adult only. So what that means is you cannot watch that video unless you have an account with Google and are over 18. So, I mean, that's the good news, right? That's why I can even upload, is because that strike has been sort of nullified. I disagree with it for a couple reasons. I disagree with it. One, I mean, so obviously, yes, I was not promoting harmful content. I was going out of my way talking about what a deadly activity that was. But that's something that I saw just as I was going somewhere. I was outside the ferry building. There's no age restriction on going to the ferry building. That's something that you will see on a fairly regular basis. I mean, you'll see almost everything that's on my channel is a normal site. People comment all the time saying, oh, wow, this makes me miss San Francisco. Like, that's something that they attribute to San Francisco. That's part of the experience. There's a couple reasons why I don't like it being age restricted. Obviously, there's no restriction on going downtown, like I already said. This is something that I feel needs to be seen by people, and I don't think that you should have to have a YouTube account in order to see it. I know a lot of people who use YouTube on a regular basis who don't have accounts. And also, I don't feel that this is a video that minors should be protected from. My message inside the video, inside the description, was that it's a deadly thing. It destroys your brain and your nervous system and your vital organs, and it can kill you, and it does kill people all the time. Huffing is not something that people generally pick up in later adulthood. Kids all the time huff. They'll huff nitrous. They'll huff gasoline. They'll huff various aerosols and whippets or whatever. I grew up inside the group homes, foster homes, shelters, and kids were doing stuff in there all the time. I think it's important that kids know that this is what's going to happen. That guy who was huffing aerosol, it was most likely spray paint. I mean, he wasn't just homeless. I assume he wasn't just homeless deciding to live in the open air downtown. Most likely, this guy started doing activities like this as a child because he had a hard life. And that is where he's at right now. I mean, you huff spray paint as a kid, and once you become an adult, you may not be able to make full sentences. I mean, if you watch documentaries like Children Underground, which is about the homeless Romanian children, they're sitting there huffing paint. I mean, they're all addicted to huffing paint. They're not 18, right? But anyhow, so the good news is that it's not a strike. So the other one, meth addict stomping up Market Street, a schizophrenic homeless man shouting and slapping himself at the bus stop, and homeless addict with Tourette's syndrome. That was a violation of YouTube's policy on harassment and bullying. And let me go over here. So that was upheld. And so I don't know if you guys have seen those videos, but what I like to do when I show when I have a video, I present it without really any narrative. I just show what it is. I don't want to be biased. I want to show the facts. And my description is generally sort of basically the circumstances in which I encountered it or what happened inside the video. Maybe a little bit of backstory, but I try not to have a strong message in there. I try to let people discover for themselves how they feel about this. So let me just read the policy on harassment and cyberbullying, just to talk about my feelings on it. So harassment and cyberbullying policy. We want you to use YouTube without fear of being subjected to malicious harassment. In cases where harassment crosses the line into a malicious attack, it can be reported and will be removed. In other cases, it may be mildly annoying or petty and should simply be ignored. Harassment may include abusive videos, comments, messages, revealing someone's personal information, and it goes on that, maliciously recording someone without their consent, deliberately posting content in order to humiliate someone, making hurtful and negative comments / videos about another person, unwanted sexualization, and incitement to harass other users or creators. So here's some of the things that I feel that they may have felt that they had grounds on, although I personally disagree. So they go out of their way to sort of say malicious, or that it's purposely harmful. So harassment may include abusive videos, comments, messages. In my videos, I try my best not to, I try just to present what I see. I don't feel like those were abusive videos. My comments, I moderate relatively lightly. What the comments are on there. Messages, I don't really send too many messages. Revealing personal information, I don't do that. Maliciously recording someone without their consent. So I think that the key word here is maliciously. Was I being malicious when I recorded this? Was that my intent with this video, with these videos? Personally, no, it was not. I really think that if that's what they're saying, that they need to point out that I was being malicious. Or the next one, deliberately posting content in order to humiliate someone. I don't feel like that's applicable here. Right? I was not deliberately posting comment in order to humiliate. The reason why I'm highlighting the things that I highlight is because I want to show that the issues that we're suffering here in San Francisco. I mean, this is a citywide issue. This is not specific. I'm not attacking anybody. I'm showing examples of some of the things that we're suffering. Making hurtful and negative comments / videos about another person. Again, I try not to make a stance on these things. Hurtful and negative. I guess you could say that the meth addict stomping up Market Street, there's no footage of him actually taking meth. It was his behavior that leads me to believe that he was on meth. So in that instance, I suppose if you wanted to sort of stretch, you could say that I was making a hurtful video about that person. The schizophrenic homeless man shouting and slapping himself at the bus stop. That sounds hurtful, right? But I tried to choose language that described exactly what was going on. In that instance, I didn't know what was going on. I actually didn't have my contacts in, and I didn't have any glasses. So I heard him yelling and screaming, and I didn't know if it was at me or what. So I started recording just so I could see on the back of the screen what was going on. And that's what you see. That's one of my earliest videos. And then with the homeless addict with Tourette's syndrome, again, I'm trying to describe what was going on. I'm not a doctor. I don't know if he had Tourette's syndrome or what, but he was repeatedly sort of shouting. He was repeatedly shouting things that didn't really make sense. You only have so much space you have within the title to sort of describe what your video is. I try not to be misleading with what I write. Inside the description, well, So here's the thing. I recorded that video and I talked to my friend Carlos about the person in that video, and asked him if he knew anything about it. He said, yeah, I know that guy. I see him all the time. Like, he's constantly yelling and screaming. The only time he ever is not yelling and screaming is when he's doing drugs. So I wrote inside the description that I basically wrote the same information that he gave me. So maybe that would appear to the people over at Google that I was attacking this person, but oh well. So ultimately, I feel like these content strikes are sort of a learning experience for me. Google obviously doesn't want me, or YouTube doesn't. They want the messages inside the videos to be clear. They want things that are non-offensive. I try to present things in a non-biased fashion, but I think in order to protect myself, in order to make things clear and make my intentions clear, I'm going to have to change the way that I present the things that I present in the future. I'm going to have to moderate the comments a little bit to make sure that people are being respectful. I'm gonna make it known inside the video, all the context, why I'm recording these videos, and to remind people that these are also people. I'm going to be going through the videos that were deleted and try to package them in a way that shows that San Francisco has a problem with these, and that these are examples of some of the problems that we're dealing with. And I'm going to try to maintain a mature community. So ultimately, what is going to change? There may be a little bit of narration, and there may be an introduction to the new videos that are uploaded. Try to present them in a way that explains my perspective, explains why I'm making these videos, and I'm going to try to be a little bit stricter with the comments and make sure that the subjects of the videos are respected, not only in the videos, but in the comments. Thank you for watching.